In today's video, we're going to be doing a full comprehensive guide on the MIRANDUS Fireside chat with McCarthy and the team. Now, I'm really excited to do this video because there was so much great information, and I took a very detailed list of notes to cover everything that was said. But before we get too far in the video, I first want to introduce myself if you haven't met me yet. So my name's Jake, and I make speculative yet very informative content on the blockchain MMO MIRANDUS. And I do this by taking all the information we've learned and breaking it down into small, digestible videos like this one for you guys to watch. So if you're looking for consistent MIRANDUS content and updates, then hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you on this page again. If not, then I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope to see you again sometime. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So this is meant to be a full comprehensive guide in the sense that I cover literally everything that I thought was important and every topic that McCarthy covered. McCarthy starts off by talking about docks and how he wants to make sure that when ships come into docks, he wants the system to look good. He doesn't want boats ramming into other boats and driving through other boats. The second topic that he talks about are the citadels and how they are a custom piece of geometry. Two have been spoken for so far, and one is under negotiations currently, and another is potentially being talked about with someone, which would make number 4. So if the potential buyer buys as well as the other party strikes a deal, that means there's only one citadel left. And I'm not hip on my citadel pricing, but I'm pretty sure they're not cheap. I'm pretty sure citadels are for some reason 20 million rings a bell. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I think, the first one sold for a little bit less, and then they slowly get more and more expensive. So if that's the case, that's incredible news for the MIRANDUS team. Afterwards, they go into the topic of dragons, and the question was whether or not multiple dragons could follow an owner. So right now, the consensus is no. McCarthy said that he just wants one dragon to work because he doesn't want to get it to where one person can have 10 dragons following him and just be super OP and unstoppable, which I totally understand. I get that completely. I'd prefer that. I'd much prefer that actually, because that's going to keep gameplay content from breaking, because when there's more factors like that, when you include more things like that, content can be cheesed, and when there's cheesable content, especially in a play to earn gaming, that's kind of a big deal. That's really not a good thing. So they're just keeping it one dragon for now, and they'll think about including 2 dragons or maybe 3 in the future. Now, they've also mentioned, and this wasn't said in this video, but dragons are the only familiar that they're thinking about right now. They're not currently thinking about any other familiar, which is interesting because, what are the other Vox for? And that's a whole other subject. Not going to get into that. So the next topic is something super important, and it's something that I've thought a lot about. Question was, how do map creation and cartographers work? So McCarthy said there will be different volumes in each zone. If a cartographer touches each volume in a zone, he will have the ability to create a map as an NFT. Then he says, after converting a map, the knowledge resets. So to make a second map, you will need to rediscover each one of those volumes inside of the zone. I think that that's a great idea, because if you could discover everything once and then permanently have that map to recreate over and over and over, that's honestly super OP, and it would make maps a lot less rare than they should be, in my opinion. Then he goes on to say that the way that maps are stored is almost like a book of maps, which is actually really, really cool. So it's almost like you're going to pull up some sort of item, maybe in your inventory or in a menu bar or something like that, and it's going to show you a map of the area. Now, this wasn't talked about in this AMA or in this fireside chat, but something they talked about previously is the idea that although you may have a current map, that doesn't mean that that map will be the same in 2-3 months, in 6 months when things change. Because I know the team's talked about changing geographical monuments and changing the landscape so that maybe even the starting zone can actually have replayable content in the future. I love that idea because that gives literally limitless opportunities for events, for just replayability in general. The next question was actually a pretty funny one. It was, do all creatures provide meat? And the answer is no, not all creatures will provide meat. You know, I personally don't think I would like to eat like goblin meat, so I think that that's a good thing. I think I'd rather stick with my beef jerky and crackers. Here's something pretty important for Mac users. So the next question was, will the next playtest be on Mac? And he said probably not by the next playtest, but it is something the team is working on. There is a way to play on Mac using some sort of VPN. Know that you can like boot camp your Mac so that you can install Windows on it and run the game on Windows through your Mac somehow. I'm not super familiar with that. I had a Mac at one point, but I actually switched to Windows partially because of MIRANDUS. But I know that it's possible. It's just a slight bit of confusion if you aren't into tech. All right. So this next question is probably the one that everyone talks about the most and one of the biggest complaints about MIRANDUS, and that is 50,000 exemplars versus 1 million players. What happens when there are way more players than there are exemplars? Because hopefully that happens, and when that does happen, that could prove to be a big issue for scalability. First and foremost, renting will be a thing, which we all known about. And he goes on to say that if the world gets so big that 50,000 exemplars seems too small, they will implement vanilla humans.
They're going to have powers and abilities, but you know, if we need more just avatars in the game, we would probably release vanilla humans that don't have those powers.
I expected this. Personally, I think that that's a really good move. That's a way for them to say, we're not going to do that right now, but if it really does become an issue, we will tackle that issue and we will implement more characters. So they didn't say exemplars. They don't want them to be exemplars. They want them to be less powerful, but still have the ability for players to get into the game. And maybe if they get into the game, then purchase an exemplar. On an interesting note, Jason actually talks about how previously he worked on a game and the game had about 2 million daily active users. But concurrent users didn't usually surpass 20,000. So if that's the case, if MIRANDUS has 2 million people to play it, then, 20,000 concurrent is actually pretty doable with the exemplars. But in my opinion, where an issue arises is how the renting mechanics work. And obviously we're going to be able to set the renting rules, but if people typically only rent out for a day at a time or 3 days at a time, obviously that exemplar is not going to get used 24/7. So there is a bit of a flaw in that, but it's still possible theoretically, depending on how the renting mechanics work. My personal guess for concurrent users in MIRANDUS, I think we could probably get up to 20 to 30,000, but that's getting pretty high, just because some exemplars will be on the market, some will be up for rent, others will just be offline. Like, there's so many different things that can happen. But if we had some sort of event where if you were on, you got some sort of item or you got to watch some sort of scene unfold, kind of like how Fortnite's done concerts in the past, it would be so cool if MIRANDUS did something like that, where they added new land, where this boss like walks through the landscape of somehow and destroys a bunch of stuff and shows new things. Like, that would be incredible, and that would probably drive up the concurrent users very dang quickly, and that would get a lot of exemplars rented. The next question was, will there be a mechanic for different quality of farmed goods or meat? And the answer was, more than likely there won't be different qualities, as they would have to build things around 3 or 4 or however many different qualities. They do like the idea of having masteries or some sort of skill affect cooking or farming or something like that. So instead of increasing the quality of the item that you get, they plan on increasing the quantity of the item you get. So if I had an exemplar that was, we'll just use a farming mastery, for instance. If I had an exemplar with farming mastery of 1, maybe if he harvests a stalk of corn, he only gets 1 corn cob, as opposed to another exemplar with a maxed out farming mastery, maybe he gets 5 corn cobs off that only 1 piece of corn. That's just kind of an idea. That's something that they're throwing around, and that's more than likely what they're going to do instead of increasing the quality, or instead of having different qualities of food. Question number 9 was, can small boats be transported by larger boats over big bodies of water? Now, that's a pretty in-depth question, but that's a very valid question. That brings into will small boats be able to cross water, or will we need big boats? Because for the longest time, we were told that you need a big boat to get to certain places. So I personally assumed that that meant that small boats couldn't sail across every part of the sea. However, it was said that all of the boats that have been currently sold will be able to cross the sea. Interesting. So maybe there's going to be like rough patches to the sea that they can't. I don't know. I'm not sure. He said for smaller streams, they would have more kind of like a mount to cross the streams or the rivers. So those are boats that aren't out yet. So even the smallest boat size right now should, according to this, be able to cross an ocean or cross any part of the ocean. So that's interesting, and that's a little bit contradictory from what we've been told in the past. But I'm not opposed to that. I really like that because boats are expensive, man. Last time I checked, I think they were $1,000 or $2,000. The next question was kind of silly. It was, will there be eating animations? And McCarthy says, and Jason says, yes, there will be eating animations. Heck yeah. The following question was about jewels and like, will jewels be important? And the answer was jewels will be insanely important.
Oh, I guess what I'm thinking with jewels is that they're insanely important. They're going to be insanely rare. And again, I like to reference real life, guys. I mean, imagine, a large ruby. I mean, I've never seen a ruby that big in my life. I saw the Hope Diamond at the Smithsonian Institute, but if there is a beautiful large gem and it is cut a certain way, that is going to be very powerful. I think you could combine that gem with materium and, absolutely be making magical gear.
McCarthy even talks about how you could maybe bring a sword into a jewel encruster, and when they encrust this certain cut jewel into your sword, it increases the attack power or the magic abilities of this sword by a certain amount with that encrusted certain cut jewel. I think that's super cool because in most other games, jewels are important as well. That's fantastic news for the Glimmering Clan Dwarves because the Glimmering Clan Dwarves will be able to mine more of an ore when they see it. So maybe that only applies to ores. Maybe that doesn't apply to jewels. I hope it applies to jewels. So maybe if a Glimmering Clan runs across diamonds, for instance, he can mine diamonds. And instead of just getting one diamond as a normal exemplar would, maybe the Glimmering Clan gets 3. I think that would be amazing. Or maybe even just a chance at multiple. I think that would definitely be worth having a Glimmering Clan. Because if you find some sort of rare jewel that's worth like $100, $500, $1,000, even $50, $20, for you to be able to multiply that by 2 or 3, that literally doubles or triples your profits. So I think that that's a really cool idea, and I hope that they make jewels a really important part of the game. Next topic was about exemplars, and they kind of go into exemplar souls a little bit, but the idea that all new players will have to start from scratch. There's no way for you to be able to rent your progress to somebody else or rent someone else's progress, because if you haven't watched my video on exemplar souls, you totally should go watch that so that you can understand this, because it's a fairly complicated subject, but it makes a lot of sense when you actually think about it. I'll briefly cover it just as a reminder though. So if you have a level 10 exemplar, there's actually 2 parts to that exemplar. There's its soul, and then there's the exemplar NFT itself. The exemplar soul contains all the stats like the levels and the masteries and such, and the actual exemplar is what's rentable to other players as just think of it as the ability to play. So if I rent my exemplar to you, then you can play with the exemplar, but the soul that you're using is actually going to be your soul. I keep my statistics or my soul, and then you use one of yours. So we're not exactly how sure it's going to work, how exactly it's going to work, but that's just kind of a general idea of how it will work. So that means that you will start from scratch anytime you start a new exemplar, which is kind of cool. I like that. I like starting over. I like grinding up and earning what you actually get. Now, there is one way that you'll be able to get an exemplar that's already high leveled, and that's if you were to, in that scenario, sell the entire exemplar as a whole. So when you rent it out to somebody, you keep the exemplar. However, If you sell this exemplar, the stats go with it, or the soul goes with it. So if I sell my super high leveled up elf on OpenSea, it's actually going to sell for a lot more because that soul is attached to my exemplar. I think that that's a perfect opportunity for some players to just level up exemplars and sell them to make money. I think that's great. That's amazing. That's going to allow some of the people who don't have the time to grind and they have the extra money, so they can spend the money on exemplars to save them time. And that's also going to allow the people with more time and not a lot of money to make money by doing so. I think it's a brilliant idea. Now, part of this is because if I rent my exemplar to you and you go out and kill my exemplar a bunch of times, whether it's by accident or you just don't like me, then why should I have to pay for that? So if you die while you're renting my exemplar, you lose the progress and not me as the exemplar owner. Now, some new information is that buildings will do the same.
I think my assumption is that when I buy a building, I would get all of the things in that building, like if a player upgraded their display cases or put area rugs in. I almost feel like you'll kind of want it as is. You get to walk in there, look around, and be like, I wish this was mine. Will you sell it to me? So we do need some way to kind of package up a bunch of NFTs and move them all.
I love that. I think that's super cool, and that's going to add a whole other level to buildings. The next question was, will anybody be able to place down crops on a deed, on a farming plot, or will just the deed owner be able to place them? And the answer is the deed owner will be the only one to plant crops or mess with the livestock on their deed. Now, they could probably pass out keys to other people, but for the most part, they're the only ones that can touch it. So a random person couldn't just come up and plant corn on my land without my permission. Next topic of conversation is one that I was actually pretty interested in. He talks about decorations a little bit. He says that he doesn't just want bushes and statues. He wants maybe a town crier that walks around and yells some news that you had pre-made for that town crier, which informs everyone of the happenings in town or the discounts that you're having in your town. I think that that's super duper cool, and maybe that's going to be, and this is speculation, getting off a little bit here, but maybe that's going to be a node, because I know we talked about having NPCs as nodes, so maybe the NPCs will actually be decorations, or a chance to be decorations. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think that that's a cool idea, and that would also give a spot for the NPC. Something they even talked about was potentially adding more decorations to deed plots than there already is, because there have been some images shared from a while back that have exactly how many building plots, how many farming plots, how many of everything is on each and every deed except for the citadels, including the number of decoration spots per deed. And there are certain deeds with more or less decoration spots, but they've talked about upping the amount in general just because they want the game to look pretty, and they want the decorations to be really cool. So question number 15 was, will you be able to rent out gear to other players? And the answer is no. When I rent out my exemplar to you, you only get the exemplar. You don't get my inventory, meaning all of the gear that I have on my exemplar, I cannot rent that to anybody. Now, it's possible that there will be a renting mechanic in the game so that you don't have to buy gear for your exemplar, but I know it's been said previously that, and it wasn't in this video, that all gear will be able to be worn by every class. So if today you wanted to rent a clear blood orc, which is mostly for exploring, but tomorrow you want to rent a whole other race, you want to rent an elf for something a little bit more dangerous or battle intense, then you can actually still use that same gear piece that you had from your orc on your elf, which I think is really cool. I hope that there are some race specific or some maybe even exemplar specific gear pieces. I think that would add a little bit more depth into the game. But then again, that's more coding, so who knows if we'll actually do that. Next thing that was said was you need to stay in a tavern or an inn to sleep. You can log out in the wild and your character will disappear, but as soon as you log back in, you're going to log back in the exact same spot. So if maybe mobs or monsters have migrated to where you were and where you logged out, you're going to spawn in the middle of a bunch of monsters and You did. And you obviously don't want that because then Miranda's death is super, super penalizing. So it's smart to log off in town. And no, logging out will not increase your sleep stat. You will need to sleep at an inn or a tavern to increase your sleep. McCarthy then talks about how the next playtest is going to involve some sort of food. And the idea is that inns allow you to eat and sleep, and taverns allow you to eat, maybe sleep, but also play games. And that's where it's going to be fun because we've already talked about the tavern games and how cool some of those look. So that's going to kind of provide a small difference between the two, whether you want to go more entertainment route or whether you just purely want to serve increasing stats. I think both are going to be very, very important though. So sleeping is how you're going to gain health back, which is actually interesting in itself. And then eating is how you're going to increase your energy regain speed, I believe is how that's going to work. And the reason I say that sleeping and healing is interesting is because in a lot of games, when you go out and you take damage, it takes, 3 to 5 seconds, and then you repair health over time or instantly. You heal out on the go. But the way this sounds is that when you're damaged, you take that damage until you sleep or until you take some sort of healing potion. So that's going to make things a lot more realistic, which is the goal of McCarthy. He says he wants Miranda's to be very realistic. So that's going to make things a lot more difficult. Make Miranda's hard. That is what I want, and that's what a lot of players want. I'm all for it. It's just going to make it that much more interesting. He then goes into how hot meals are going to give you hours of gameplay at a time, as opposed to like cold meals or something you could stuff in your backpack might only give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, just to be able to get you to where you need to go. So if you're going to be out for a long time, then maybe stock up on a lot of those. That way you can be out a little bit longer. However, if you do enter the hungry state or the starving state, then it's going to affect your energy regen, and you cannot sleep if you're starving, nor can you sprint. So if you can't sprint and you can't sleep and your energy sucks, that's going to be really, really hard, especially when you're out in the wild and you're getting chased by something. Though you could probably hop on a horse and be fine. If I don't know how that works exactly, but I'm assuming if you're starving and you make it to your horse, as long as your horse isn't starving, I don't know if that's going to be a thing either, then you can make it back to town okay. The next question was pretty juicy too. So it was, where are you in development right now? And the answer was game development is slow in the beginning, but then it gets quicker once things are built for scalability. They just did a playtest where they put 1,000 items in an environment for a player to see, and it ran super smooth, which is great news. Next playtest will be substantially better than the last, as it took a lot to stand up the Goblin Glade, and so it's going to be a lot quicker to develop more zones now. So in this playtest, we had like one zone. We had Goblin Glade or Goblin Meadows or whatever they call it. They actually refer to it as both. But in the next playtest, they're looking at potentially having multiple zones. It's not just going to add one more zone. They're talking about this next playtest literally being like 30 to 40 times bigger than this previous playtest that we were in. And in this next playtest, this is exciting. I'm just going to play the clip for you guys.
But in the next playtest, goblins and everything else are going to be attacking you. So we're going to stand up kind of a V1 AI. They will see you, they will notice you, and they will come up and they will attack you and they will kill you. And I really want to make that death hardcore. I really want it. I want this next playtest to be, there's a goal. I'm not going to tell you what the goal is, but there is a goal to it. And I want to see if you guys can adventure in it and do it and complete it. And I want there to be a really cool reward if you do. And I want it to be hard. I think you guys will have more fun with it if it's a great challenge. But there's going to be combat. Things are going to come at you. You'll be killing things. You'll be looting them. You'll be crafting better weapons and gear. The size of this next playtest is going to be, I think it'll probably support, you're talking about 275 and it broke last time. I mean, I think it's not impossible that we could have 500-600 concurrents, or actually more if you spread them across the zones. And I'm saying zones as there are multiple. I'm trying to think in my mind. I think this next playtest from a size perspective is 9. I think this is something like 30 times bigger than the Goblin Glade. It might be more than that. It might be 40 times larger. I'm trying to math it in my head. But I just really like this idea that this next playtest is a Mario Brothers moment. Like, you know, if you die, I like the idea that you have to start all over. Oh my God, bomb drop. There's a goal in this playtest. It's not on chain, so you're progressing. There's cool stuff you get. You can upgrade. But you got to be careful when you walk around, because if you overextend yourself or just run in like you don't care, and you get a few goblins on you and you're not ready and you die, I like the idea that screen goes red, bloody, and kicked out just kicked out of the game.
This next topic was actually really, really cool. So they talk about positional audio.
1% chance that this is going to happen, so it's guaranteed. So here's what we want to do. We want to have positional audio so that you feel like you're there. We want it to be as real as it can be, so you have like a normal inverse square fall off to the sound, and as you're walking around, you can hear your friends. But not just that. I mean, that's a pretty good tech lift. I mean, there are already people who do that, but they have huge teams. But what we want to do is put you in character. So we want to have we have a guy who's just an awesome. Barry is an amazing guy. He's he's got a master's in machine learning, and he wants to help us build a voice conversion system that allows you to talk in real time with your normal voice straight through the microphone, and it comes out everyone else's speaker set as the orc that you're currently using. So if you log in with a female orc, you're going to sound like a female orc. If you log in as a male elf, you're going to sound like a male elf. If you log in as a human, you probably sound like yourself. But you'll be either male or female depending on the avatar you picked.
Now, there isn't a guarantee that this is going to happen, but this was a huge leak, which I think is great. I think that's super, super cool. That sounds like so much fun. And that's also going to help kind of fight the prejudice against girls in gaming. It was either McCarthy's daughter or Jason's daughter who actually had the idea to bring this up because when she plays games, she never plays with a mic because she gets made fun of if she's playing. And even if she's not getting made fun of, she's getting patronized in some sort of way. So this is going to be a great way for games to be inclusive to everybody and everyone be able to enjoy Mirandus. And also add a sick new feature to an MMO. And then the final topic of conversation was some sort of common language around the land that the monsters speak. And if you were able to figure it out and you're able to speak the language or understand the language, then you're going to learn secrets that hardly anyone knows. I mean, literally no one knows besides you or anyone else who knows the language. So maybe they're going to be speaking about a certain place where there's, maybe there's coordinates in this certain place of a buried treasure of thousands of dollars of materium or something like that. I think that would be super duper cool. They've talked about even hiring somebody to write this goblin language. So, hey, if you know who's doing it, I'll just play this clip for you guys so that you can kind of hear exactly what they're talking about.
How does the goblin language sound? RH, just so you know, we are working on an actual language. Mike Raznick and some of the other guys have been on the audio team are working on this. We've already kind of kicked that off. We want that authenticity to it, and we kind of like the idea that there's a language of Mirandus that kind of like a common tongue of the land that the creatures might speak, which we think is cool. But we are developing an actual language that I guess you could learn.
I think that that's super cool. Again, that's going to add to the realism of the game. It's going to add more depth to the game. And man, I want Mirandus right now. I wish that it was coming out sooner. I understand they need time to make the game amazing, but yeah, I wish there was more Mirandus content out now so that we can play and progress now. But that pretty well wraps up the entire AMA in a nice bundle of hopefully decent information. I covered, I think, every single thing that McCarthy talked about. I tried to hit every single thing that McCarthy and Jason both talked about in the Fireside chat. One last thing before we end the video. So previously, I've talked about a Discord a little bit, but I was never there enough myself to provide enough value to continually promote the Discord. I love the idea of having a Discord, but I'm just not active in Discord enough and answering questions enough to justify having my own Discord. However, a couple of friends of mine and people from the community actually got together and created a guild called the Masters of Materium. And the Masters of Materium, their abbreviation is MOM, which I think is hilarious. And usually when I'm talking or speculating about Mirandus, it's in there with those guys answering questions and speculating about different aspects of what the game will be or could be. On top of that, their Discord is super well run, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with inside the game. So if you're looking to be a part of a great Mirandus guild, earn medieval riches, and have fun while doing it, then join the Masters of Materium. And I'll throw a link in the description below, and let me know, like tag me when you all join. That way we can chat a little bit. But that's pretty much all I had for you guys today. I appreciate y'all watching so much. There was another AMA that dropped the day that I'm recording this, so I'm going to have to do another video on that upcoming pretty soon. I'll try to have that out this week. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.